With regards to the so-called literally named um, for seven Ronin, no, yeah, I realize it's a very similar title to the to one of the earliest. It's a very strange case with regards to public reaction. Of course, as anyone might notice, based on my past commentary, I often think reception is strange. Now, I'm not saying this is one of the best. I mean, it's but it is a strange case because Japanese reception was bad. Now that might have something to do with the fact there were seven others before it. You know, it's one of those things. Just seven others. Yeah, you sort of expect it to. I don't know, just one of those things. There are quite a lot of others. Yeah, they could just keep making these rehashes. Now, I mean, there were already loads before, so it's not like just suddenly. And not only are there seven movies, there's also loads of series, loads of episodes, countless hours. In other words, all about the same story. So in that sense, it is quite repetitive. And if somebody happened to have watched them all, then yeah, sure enough, they see a Hollywood version. They've already seen them all, and they think, why would I need to watch this? And that is why it was a box office bomb, practically. So, in other words, it's not so much the fact that people watched it, and then I think there were a few people in the first place who watched it. Maybe some recommended it, but not exactly a lot of people. A lot didn't go to watch it in the first place. You know, Personally, I enjoyed it for what it is. I mean, it does it has have interesting CGI, shall we say, right? I mean, yeah, in terms of what they did, with regards to the budget and such, they really did go too far. However, okay, the budget, um, yeah, that's a problem. But I'm just saying in terms of how enjoyable the movie is. Um, in terms of what it does, of course. I mean, it's not very far off from a Jackie Chan movie, right? And instead of martial arts, of course, we get um, this. But well, most martial arts movies do not even use CGI, so in that sense, it's different. Now, I've watched other, so-called jideki, I think it's called, movies, samurai movies, in other words. Um, Movies like Kurosawa's and such. I've watched a few. I haven't watched a lot, but and while they may detail some history, they may detail Bushido and such. In terms of the history and such, some of them have uh, possibly fictional tales adapted from Shakespeare, like in Rand's case and such. Uh, so I mean, they're interesting to an extent, um, in terms of the history itself. But when it comes to all these sword fights, constant sword, it does become a bit samey, right? Just there were sword fights in this movie, but there were also big beasts made using computer imagery, of course. But um, I was impressed with the CGI there. I mean, just uh, I don't know why people thought that somehow it wasn't worth watching in a cinema, especially. No, I didn't watch it in a cinema, but I thought that it would have been pretty good to watch in a cinema because it's cinematic. It's also made into 3D, and I haven't watched it in 2D, but I can see the benefit, the potential benefit. Things coming in towards you and such. Yeah. So if I ever get a chance, I think I'll want to watch it in 3D again. Apparently, it's going to have a sequel, the beginning production next year. So probably comes out 22 or 23. Saying that, of course, last time they were even later. But anyway, uh, you know, I personally liked it for what it is. You know, it's not you know it's not an absolute masterpiece, but it's not a they all spend too much, and if Universal wasn't so I don't know what it tried to do at the end. They apparently just kicked out the director, and we shot some scenes and cut away some scenes, and that used up even more of the budget. What's the point of that, so the production seemed a bit chaotic, really. And Universal is one of the biggest studios, so I'm not entirely sure how it could be so seemingly dysfunctional with one of its biggest movies. It was also, in fact, they commented on this at the time. Very strange to give 165 million to a someone who only ever did shorts before then, and since it bombed, I'm assuming I just couldn't find anything else to direct. I assume he only did one ad for Shell since then. One minute ad. That's it. That's all he did. A 1 minute ad about 2 years after this movie got released. It's sort of pitiful. I mean, it's not like I enjoy this. I'm not entirely sure what directors do specifically in the sense. So I mean, what exactly he did as a director for this movie, uh, specifically, in the sense that I liked the CGI. I like the cinematography mostly. Those two were pretty good. Script wise, I mean, it was contextual. It was what it's supposed to be about and such. Um, all right, they could have given more background to the characters. Like I read about these characters after I finished, um, as I always do. Not most movies are based on the history, of course, but I read on some of them here. I read what happened. I mean, there wasn't much more to. So in a way, yeah, this is the thing, right? I mean, it's not like people just do not like CGI or something, right? Because right, which other prominent movie franchise uses CGI extensively? Transformers, right? And it's ridiculous the amount of box office it made, absolutely ridiculous. So why couldn't this have made box office as well? I don't get it. Combining CGI with samurai, I think, in my opinion, is pretty interesting. Look at this. It's ridiculous. The first Transformers also used up a budget of 150 to 200 million and made 700 million. 700. What ridiculous. 700. 700. My goodness. Yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, this 7 for 7. I mean, Ronin was apparently, adjusted by inflation, the second worst um, box office bomb. Was still nominated for some awards, but the criticism wasn't universally panned. But so it's not like it doesn't have 0% on Metacritic. But most people seem to think it wasn't that good. And I don't get it. I mean, what's good about Transformers? I mean, they're fairly similar, but it's just so instead of Japanese mythological creatures being CGI'd, there are cars transforming into anthropoid things. I mean, honestly, I thought that creature at the beginning looked better than some sort of car transforming. It's ridiculous. I mean, look at this. Um, the Transformers here has so many awards, not Oscar, sure enough. But, oh wait, it was nominated. Wow. Okay, well, maybe I'm the only one who doesn't think highly of Transformers on you. Revelation. Let me saying this, I haven't seen it in a long time, so I might be forgetting a bit, but I don't remember being impressed. Uh, just one of those things. Uh, I think it's just people who like cars in this instance here. I mean, there are a lot of cars, and seeing them transform, I'm sure if people like cars and they're suddenly transforming and becoming your best buddy, yeah, great. But you know, it's odds to say the least. And I mean, they're both similar at any rate, right? They both use CGI extensively. I think for several Ronin does as well. But what is the difference here? I'm trying to compare like with like. There's no like in terms of box office, of course. The other one didn't even make up its budget. Ridiculous. And this was, I think, yeah, the very first. So no wonder it ended up with eight movies. Yeah, okay. Transformers for franchise did begin in 1980s, I guess. So that was the background to it, but and I've only pretty much seen I think one or two, so I'm not exactly I'm only commenting on like the first one or something. But seriously, overall the franchise used up a budget of 1 billion and made nearly 5 billion in box office. Ridiculous. Yeah, it's like a guaranteed CGI profit at this point. So anyway, but I'm just saying that I yeah I about equally, if not more, liked for the seven Ronin. The battle at the end with apparently it was a kitsune. It wasn't quite obvious, didn't see a tail. I suppose they thought of using her hair as a tail. Kitsunes are supposed to be foxes, and sure enough, she was transforming into a fox. So yes, that's yeah. I'm not sure why but you sometimes you see like in anime or such, you see the human transformations also having tails or such. This one apparently used her hair in that fashion. I suppose I don't know. It was quite something to use hair to eat. Yeah, that's quite innovative. You know, one character she reminded me of is Kagura from Inuyasha. She also came and like on sort of riding the wind and such, very very that kind of thing. I mean, it's this kitchen I didn't travel on a leaf though, so there are differences. And Kagura wasn't a kitsune either, so she was also supposed to be a yakai though. So of course that's the one word they didn't use. That's the one criticism I have of it. If only, I mean, even the fact that they used English was awkward, and I'm assuming that's one major reason why Japanese moviegoers, unless of course it was dubbed. I'm not sure if it was dubbed, it was made explicit from what I've read. I mean, I'm assuming it could have been dubbed likely, but anyway, I don't know. So, but yeah, the problem then with this, especially I mean for someone who has who does usually watch, I haven't watched Asian media for a while now, as one might notice, but I did normally in the past, and one thing that is very obvious with Japanese, and most cultures really. I'm not sure why they chose to do this. Yeah, is the fact that most people have two names in most cultures, but in Japanese society especially, they're quite important because they denote often clans and such. I don't know why they decided to just omit the second name. That's not something I liked because I couldn't figure out, who anyone was. So that was annoying in a sense. Not a major sense, but and yeah, I noticed apparently there was a tie-in with what else? Sengoku Basra, of course. They're both very similar. Oh, of course, one is animation and one is live action, but they both use fantasy, and well, in this case, this uses CGI, but in the other case, just uses plain animation. But they both use, a fantastic approach to storytelling. That they try to transform history into fantasy, essentially, which has its charm in a way. It doesn't add much substantially, I got to admit, and yes, Unkoku Basra wasn't exactly the most substantial anime ever. It, it felt sort of like fast food in a sense. Um, but it still had its charm. I mean, it's one of those things. I could still sort of get the my criticisms of Sing Bus were more about sort of how they changed the story mainly and such. With regards to this, so I don't think they changed it too much. I mean, in terms of what happened when Asano tried to murder Kira, well, in real life, apparently though they had some argument. It's not even very clear what happened, and he tried to murder him, and then he was asked to commit seppuku and such. So I mean, it's much more mundane. I'm not going to criticize this movie for turning what's really some mundane quarrel into a fantasy-filled action sequence in a sense, right? I mean, using a spider and walking around and, and using being seemingly a piece of cloth just floating on the wind to deliver a spider. I mean, that was cool. I got to admit, it's not substantial per se, it's not something very deep, it's just stylish. Now, Sengoku Bus also tried to be stylish in this sense, but as I said, it did change the story quite a lot. Quite a lot. I mean, some ultimately it's still there. It still has the same sort of direction as in history, so fine. So does this, of course. Apart from um, Keanu Reeves' character, of course. Um, and yeah, by the way, I find it very strange that apparently someone thinks that this movie didn't do very well because he was on this thing, like a break between stardom or something. Makes no sense really, because I mean, but this was 10 years after the last Matrix installment. So okay, 10 years is quite a lot. Apparently, all the other movies he did in between didn't amount to much. Apparently, but he only sort of became a star again somehow with John Wicks. I haven't seen that yet, but um, I also don't know what is required for one to for this to happen. It makes no sense because I mean, this could have been a franchise as well, just like John Wicks became. I mean, what's the difference? John Wick doesn't use CGI. People just hate CGI. Something. Well, I mean, they don't seem to hate it based on Transformers box office, do they? So, yeah, it's weird. Yeah, they blame it on Keanu Reeves somehow being in between starting. Um, you know, as I said, I like the CGI. I like everything that happened, and yeah, personally, actually, this was the first time I was introduced. So this was my introduction to how do you pronounce this again? Shushingura. There we go. Oh wait, Shushin. No, I think I pronounced it. Shushingura. Which apparently means What does it mean again? It means the treasury of loyal retainers. I don't know if treasure in a sense means money, of course. I don't suppose it does. In some circumstances, that's what it means. But anyway. So yeah, there were countless movies made out of it. And quite remarkable. I mean, the very first adaptation, the very first, was actually apparently a couple of weeks after this event happened in the 1700s. So this might be one of the longest running adaptations. In terms of actual films, though, celluloid films, of course, was only in the last 100 years or so that it was possible, but sure enough, they began as soon as possible here, 1928. But the very first, yeah, there were a few adaptations that were supposed to, be at first and such, but there was censorship happened for some reason. What reason? Of course, yeah, pretty obvious reason. Now that I think of it, yeah, the fact that this happened essentially because of the shogun, isn't it? So, suppose they think of it. And then, ironically, there was censorship after World War II as well, because it showed certain militarism, which sort of does, but whatever. It's a historical thing. Um, Strangely enough, through this, I also came across this concept of a death poem. I haven't quite come across it before, but apparently it's mostly Japanese people who do this, or at least Buddhist cultures, apparently. In a way, it's interesting, but hmm, unless one, I guess, is committing suicide in a sense, not sure one can write poems. I mean, many people are um, even incapacitated at that point, so you know, only watch it suicide, I suppose. So it's like a suicide novel in a sense. But yeah, anyway, the very first adaptation, though essentially which actually used the word Chushingura, is Kana Dehon Chushingura, it was called, which I think it's no, I'm not sure what Kahan Dehon is. But anyway, it's apparently a bunraku, a theater, and it came out in 1748. This thing has been going on for ages. And then there was another adaptation in 2015, as if one Hollywood movie wasn't enough. Yeah, yeah, I'm curious actually. Did this make money? No. I don't know. Why did they even make it? Of course they didn't. And from the looks of it, it's unfortunately, I'm assuming, even more boring. I'm assuming it didn't use CGI. I'm assuming it's not fantastic. Just assuming here, but I haven't watched it. I mean, I'll watch others, but at this point, I don't regret to start with this. I don't regret it. Because it's honestly, I like fantasy and any fantastical elements in movies generally are bonus. Honestly, I think they are. And here this says here that last night is an action drama. So sounds very mundane, which I'm assuming is also how all the other adaptations are. Really, the 28 version, the 41, 56, 58, 61, 62, 65, 78, 94, 94. Wow. Why would they release two in 1 year? They're different directors as well. In 2000, and that's the last one. before 747 Samurai, and yeah, all of these were Japanese, were directed by Japanese people. So and then after 2000, it's a couple of anyway. What's strange about this is that there's so much of this, and yet there isn't a single animated adaptation. Wow, the Land of Anime that somehow doesn't have an animated adaptation of one of its most popular stories. Then I came across another tale here because when I looked at this kind of hidden thing, this describes this Chishungura as one of the most popular Japanese plays, ranked with Zemi's Matsukuza Kaze. Um, yeah, and guess what? Matsukaze has no adaptations at all, apart from an opera. Of course, an opera doesn't exactly, and someone recorded it. I don't know, like theaters, they're kind of annoying because of that. They have a set amount, and they probably need to travel half the country, if not other countries. And so anyway, I don't get this. I don't get why they do this. So for one tale about these Ronin, there are what is it, like 10 adaptations now? I think it's 10, isn't it? 7, 8, 9. No, there's even more. Yeah, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's an incredible amount. And then there's 5 series. Of course, they're NHK Tiger dramas. They have loads and loads of drama. They're like an industry of live action drama. So anyway, yeah. As I said, it's still very surprising. There's no animated version of this though. I mean, this is Japan is also very much it has the most industrialized form of animation making, and this is one of the most popular tales. And somehow there's no other. Because I wouldn't mind if there was an anime. Usually, somehow I prefer usually. So like with Sengoku Basso. Now I know that I did actually check if there was anime before I watched this. I just I don't know. I would prefer to watch anime first, no matter what it's like, rather than live action. Of course, if there isn't, then yeah, live action, and live action with fantasy added to it, I think is even better. No, than I mean, plain drama has its charm as well. It's usually serious. That's pretty much it. It's not like this wasn't serious. I mean, it wasn't comedic, but serious in the sense that mundane in the sense of this sort of down to earth, non fantastic adaptation. Whereas this had this gigantic creature, uh, which apparently was called a killing. It wasn't actually said, it wasn't actually mentioned in the movie. Apparently, it's a killing or kirin, and it's a mythical hoofed chimerical creature. Mostly, I think, apparently in Chinese and Asian countries, not so much Japanese. I've seen the statue before. I've never actually seen it in either live action or animation. So yeah, that was pretty cool, and that must be a great scene entry in the cinema. This is why I wonder how I didn't make. I mean, it's quite cinematic, even just for that scene. Not so much when they're talking or whatever. somehow, yeah. So I think it was like this domino effect thing, where Japanese people thought, we've already watched so many of these, and it's not even by the country where the incident happened, so let's pass it. Let's pass it away, and it's only made 1 million or so in Japan, and Universal was already despairing at that point. But yeah, overall, then it didn't even recuperate its budget. It's ridiculous. There's, I'm not saying this is necessarily better than Transformers, but what is so different? There was a huge soldier, sort of similar to a huge samurai, apparently made out of thin air or something. And that reminded me of Sucker Punch. There were two huge samurai there as well. And actually, there was an anime where that happened as well. Yeah, what was it called again? With a big black ball. Forgot the name suddenly. Anyway, yeah, I kind of like this. I mean, you it had some gruesome parts. Like when he, had Kiva's head in his head. When he was holding it and stuff. So yeah, that's gruesome. They could have skipped it, I suppose, because otherwise, when they beheaded people and such, they skipped that. They didn't show anything explicit, which is, I think, always more sort of, you ruin a movie really if you're explicit with a lot of things generally. Like, some rom-coms, as I always complain about in other commentary, some rom-coms seem to think that vomit is funny. It's the most unfunny thing ever, in my opinion. Disgusting. And in terms of well, this topic here, there was so much seppuku happening. Luckily, though, there wasn't actually anything explicit showed, because seppuku, of course, is literally disembowelment, and that's the most horrid way to die. Must be. I just can't believe they did that. Honestly, I found myself having an issue with the very act that it happened. But of course, it's just a historical thing, so whatever. This is not even fictional, but at least the movie didn't show the most explicit things. I mean, it's better than um. Maybe if it did show them, then it might as well be one of those. Yeah. No, it was stylish. Yeah, kind of like, yeah, a live action Sengoku Basho movie. With fantasy added as well. Um, I don't know quite why Keanu is so prominent on the poster though, because he barely has much of a part, and they don't even include the other guy, Hiroyuki Sanada's character, when he's pretty much even more prominent. What kind of decision making is it? I think this is a problem with Universal, really. What nonsense. And there's this bit where someone here, yeah, tries to see exactly why it didn't do much. Yeah, yeah, by Kirsten Acuna of Business Insider, and she thought that releasing it in Christmas was a bad idea. I guess, yeah. I mean, it's not even a Christmas movie really, so oversaturation of movies took too long in the vault. Yeah. Took over a year to be released. And then, as I said, Reeves as an actor was in between stardom, which is sort of an absurd concept, but I suppose it makes sense in a way. Unless this movie itself was going to just, I don't know what makes a movie successful, an actor or the movie itself. It's a chicken and egg situation, I suppose. Um, but you know what? I liked it, if anything, for the fact that I learned a bit about this particular incident, and I learned about it in with fantasy. I mean, I like fantastic sort of things, you know. I was more critical about Sengoku Buster because it changed so much of the story. Obviously it was about a longer period. It is a there's many more hours to it than this. This is about a single incident when it's about many incidents, but I don't know why it changed so much. Yeah, just like in Sekigahara, at the very end, there were characters who were actually dead historically, who were alive in the anime. Like, well, why? And I know they're not trying to be at all accurate, but that's just going the other direction. Just making sure not to be accurate. And then I just yeah, in terms of that, though, this didn't seem to be that deviating. Someone cannot really say that, with all honesty, that, um, you know, this says here that this film has nothing in common with the original historical epic because it's set in a world of witches and giants. Um, it's just called fantasy. It's still very similar to the original tale, from what I've read so far, at least. I mean, just because they use a spider and she was floating around and she's a kitsune, and there's a giant samurai that didn't exist, and it's just fantasy. And it's kind of a bit like um, Rose of Versailles, because it had historical things, but it also introduced some fictional characters, like the protagonist, in fact, as well. So in that sense, Keanu Reeves is like Oscar in that anime. He didn't exist, but they introduced him for some reason. It's not a major complaint, right? It's not even a complaint, honestly. I like the CGI. I'm not saying it's like one of the best movies ever because it's so profound and blow my mind. It's not none of that. Sure enough, in terms of CGI, then um, Lord of the Rings, I suppose one could say, is even more impressive. I suppose I don't know. I remember being in the cinema. Maybe because it's the cinema factor, but the CGI there truly blew me. The trees walking and such, very impressive. I think there was more CGI, in fact, there. But I don't know. I mean, Transformers aren't rated as highly as Lord of the Rings. Uh, I'm assuming Lord of the Rings is also profitable, but you know, I, for first Transformers to even be profitable. Anyway, I don't know, I'm not going to just. I barely remember it anyway. So yeah, but this wasn't too bad really, even though it didn't make much profit at all. Yeah. When the sequel comes out, I wouldn't mind. Apparently, it's going to be to have more genres. Yeah, mixture of horror and cyberpunk. I think if executed well, could be good. Yeah, but just one of those things. Those weird things where, yeah, I think you could see, people somehow like something so much, and I'm just absolutely baffled as to how, and there's such nonsense, and then people do not like it. I mean, it's not like it's rated too badly, it's rated 6.4 on average. Uh, that's not too bad, but in terms of box office, maybe they did overuse too much, in terms of the budget. Maybe that's the primary thing why it bombed, really. But then it wouldn't look like that if they didn't use as much budget, I suppose. Uh, I don't know why they didn't want to go watch in the cinema. Personally, if I could watch in the cinema, I probably would, because it's much more cinematic than it is, on TV, no matter how big, But, it's yeah, it's interesting, I suppose, in a way. It's not too very much more interesting than Sengoku Basu. Ultimately, it's sort of similar. set in 100 years later, of course. Grandson, great grandson of Ieyasu.